just in the process of going through Black Bolt's, just, coming up with the rest of his background. But I just also want to make sure that folks know that we're live, formally and officially. Do, 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 do. There we go. Ba, ba, ba. And then let me go over here on Facebook. So how are you doing otherwise?
All right. Work wasn't too bad today, so. And Yaz is definitely feeling back to her regular self, so that's good.
Good. Glad to hear that. Hey, Matt.
Hey!
Matt is a big fan and one of our patrons, and there's Janine. Well, we will be, let's see, we will be getting to Echo another in a couple weeks because as Doc and I had discussed, and we were reaching out to deaf podcasters, hard of hearing podcasters, someone from the community to assist us with the episode, and we have not yet, unfortunately, found anybody to come on, both A, as a guest, and B, to play Echo. So we said we'd rather just, kind of push it back until we can do it right, rather than just meet the arbitrary deadline. So Matt not really able to stick around, but want to tell you guys to have a great couple shows. We will. Thank you. And looking forward to, engaging with you in the Discord as always. All right, so let's see. In Black Bolt's background, I am up to Inhumans versus X-Men. Ba, 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 ba. Let's see. I would say, I guess I don't want to say it's the last major thing, but Inhumans versus X-Men. There's a couple of other stories involving Black Bolt. More recently, Death of the Inhumans. I suppose we can talk about that. And all right, and Matt sent me his write-up. I had forgotten, by the way, that Black Bolt and Medusa have a telepathic connection.
Ah, there you go.
So, um, I mean, I don't think that's really
It's
gonna.
it still works with me because the whole point is they have the connection, not
Yes,
me. So yeah.
correct. So I don't. So after I remembered that, and Matt had also mentioned it, I was like, oh right. That can still work for the way the skit was written. So I didn't think it was going to be too much of an issue. Ugh. All right, so let's get audition up and running. Let me just create the folder.
So we're doing Cyborg first?
Yes, we'll start with Cyborg.
Okay.
The Roadcaster. And it's on that. There we go. And I'm now recording.
I am also recording.
All right. In 3, 2, 1. All right. And hey, Alan. Hey, guys. Happy to catch the live show.
Hey.
Which, by the way, I know I promised I was going to bring it to you this weekend. The traffic was bad yesterday. And today I spent all day cleaning and editing. My plan now is to drop it off to you on my way home from work tomorrow.
Don't worry about it. It's totally fine.
I know I know I can just send it in the mail, but I don't think I have an envelope big enough for the comics and the shirt.
Okay.
So, but I just figured I would show Alan that, repping the merch.
Yay.
So Doc, don't worry about it. I'll send you a separate package.
Okay.
Alan, I got it, Alan. It's going to be a lot easier. I know, ironically, yes, it would have taken less time for you to ship it from West Virginia to New Jersey than me to drive the 25 minutes to his house. But I swear.
Well, wait.
I will get it to him.
Yeah, but let's look at this both ways. I could have just as easily driven to your house. So
Yes, you could.
Right. So don't worry about it.
So really, it's your fault.
Nice.
Come on, I wasn't going to let that one go that easily. All right, let me bring let me just double check Cyborg that everything is ready. We got Carrington from Real Dudes Podcast. Matt is joining us as well. We're starting with Cyborg, but we'll get to Black Bolt, and we got a good one for you, Matt. Oh, the only thing we didn't come up with for Black Bolt or Cyborg is recommended reading. I'll lean on you more for the Cyborg. What is there a particular Titan story, or something that you think would work better?
All right. Good question.
And then Matt, if you have a particular Black Bolt story that you'd think would work really well for the recommended reading. Because like I said, I reached out to Ariel, but unfortunately she was not responsive to the DM. I mean, you can think about it. It's not anything that you have to come up with right now. I just figured I would put that, at least for Cyborg, put that bug in the back of your brain. All right. So, you ready to go, bro?
Yep. All set.
Tzatziki. We had chicken souvlaki for dinner. It's delicious. Ready in 3, 2. Hello and welcome to Capes on the Couch, where comics get counseling. I'm Anthony Sitko.
And I'm Dr. Issues.
This is issue number 147, and we're covering Victor Stone Cyborg, as requested by present level patron Ariel, who's continuing on her Teen Titans kick. So I'm sure we'll get, Beast Boy next, or somebody else from the Raven, maybe. I don't know, but I'm sure she's going to eventually, get back to the Bat family, but she'll stick with the Titans for a bit. Anyway, just a quick reminder that we're still taking questions for our 150th episode. Ask us anything. So get those questions into capesonthecouch@gmail.com, or you can send us a tweet, or you can join our Discord, and, just a fun way. And really, any way you want to communicate with us, let us know, even if it's a Facebook DM or what have you. Go ahead and get those questions in, because we have a lot of fun stuff planned for 150. But a big part of that is going to be the AMA from the fans. We love engaging with and hearing from y'all. So, without any further ado, we're just going to dive right into Cyborg, Victor Stone, created by Marv Wolfman and George Perez in DC Comics Presents number 26, October of 1980. He's really only 40 years old. I think by virtue of the fact that he's been included in so many adaptations as of late, whether it's Teen Titans or Teen Titans Go or the Justice League movie, I think he's definitely escalated himself into a much more of I would say, a high B list character. I don't know that I'd necessarily call him a full A list, but he's definitely on a high B list.
Yeah, that's fair.
But like I said, it's interesting when I was going through this, and I was like, he was created in 1980. And then I said,
Right.
oh, right. Basically, all the Titans were created in that early 80s period. So Victor Stone, in the original iteration, Victor Stone is the son of two scientists who use him as a test subject for intelligence experiments, which he resents, and he falls in with a dangerous crowd as a way to rebel. So one of his parents' experiments brings a hostile creature from another dimension into his parents' laboratory. The creature kills his mother and gravely injures Victor before his father, Silas, can return it to its home dimension and close the portal. So his father then uses bleeding edge experimental technology to save him, at the cost of the majority of his body now being robotic. And when Victor awakens, he lashes out at his father, saying he'd rather be dead than experimented on without his consent. So he joins the Teen Titans as a way to kind of find others with common experiences, other outcasts, freaks who want to do good but are kind of shunned by society because Victor, by again virtue of the fact that he's overwhelmingly robotic, is kind of pushed aside. Mind you, again, this is the early 80s. This is pre-Google Glass. This is before a lot of modern technology has existed in the way that we know it. And so I don't want to say that he would be necessarily welcomed, but I think his reaction in 2022 would be a lot less, say, frightening than it would in 1980, 1981 when this was written.
Yeah, that's a great point, but at the same time, we'll get into that with one of the issues, or at least I will delve into that a bit, because yes, it would be considered more commonplace, but that doesn't necessarily help the person in the moment. But we'll dive into that.
Oh, agreed. I'm just talking about the reception that he would get externally as opposed to his own internal thoughts and processes. I'm just talking externally. I think he'd be received with at least more mild of a response than versus 40 some odd years ago. So he then merged with an alien artificial intelligence named Technus, which helped him restore his mind, although it turned his body into an entirely cybernetic being named Cyberion, and he had to stay on the Technus planet in order to survive. So this experience left him distant from humanity, and when he returned, he assimilated all the technology he could find until he was about the size of a moon, and then he was attacked by the Justice League and the other Titans, who were kind of arguing as to what the best way to deal with him was. The Justice League basically wanted to, for lack of a better term, destroy him, whereas the Titans said, he's our friend, he's in there somewhere, let's do what we can. And so Beast Boy was able to reach Victor's humanity and got him to upload his consciousness to another suit, rendering Technus inoperable. Hashtag because comics. So he gets dismantled during the Infinite Crisis story, and it takes almost a year to put him back together. And then he wakes up and he's like, what? Like Thomas Jefferson, what did I miss? What did I miss?
Nice.
Hey, I'm the one making the Hamilton reference this week. So in New 52, which tweaks his origin. It's still generally the same, but the explosion in his father's office is now related to a mother box, and Silas uses the technology to save Victor's life. And now Victor can access the New Gods library and discovers Darkseid is invading Earth in search of the anti-life equation. So if this sounds familiar, it's because this is basically what was used as the story in Justice League, both the Zack Snyder and the version by He Who Shall Not Be Named. Um, so Victor joins the fight with the Justice League to battle the invaders and becomes a founding member of the team. So it's in respect to what we were saying earlier, that he's definitely elevated. Previously in the original DC story, he was a Teen Titan who kind of worked his way up and eventually became affiliated with the Justice League. In the New 52, he's a founding member from day one. So after the Crime Syndicate, which is an evil mirror version of the Justice League from Earth 3, invades, they're basically the goatee wearing versions of the Justice League. If you know the Star Trek original series, the Cyborg is taken over by Grid, which is that Earth's Cyborg, and it expelled all of his organic material. So Hal Jordan used the Green Lantern ring to suspend him until Silas could operate on him and revive him again. And this kind of brings them. It doesn't solve their relationship, but it definitely helps it. And there's a couple other stories, but I really want to get into the issues here because I think there's a great amount that we can discuss when it comes to Victor. And so the theme for this week is tinkering. That's the theme for the issues here. And so the first one is adjustment to prosthetics. And this is something that we're definitely going to get into when we discuss the real world analog for treatment, but just the idea that you go from this entirely organic being, this corporeal form that we all recognize as human, to when you wake up, there's this horrible accident. And when you wake up, I would venture to say probably 80% of his body is no longer flesh and bone. And comics or not, that is quite the mental toll, regardless of how much of his brain and his soul, quote unquote, is remaining intact. That still does a number on you mentally.
So there are many choices that need to be made, and I don't want to give short shrift to the original point in the comics where he says if he had a choice, he would not have done this. That is important to our definition of healthcare in the first place. We do things in emergencies to save lives. We do things with consent for the benefit of the person involved. And there's a huge difference. So we are often left as providers to deal with the aftermath of choices that we had to make on behalf of someone else. Hopefully, it's with information obtained from relevant parties, family members, those close to them, the person that's designated to make that decision well ahead of time. Hint, hint, please do that, people. It really makes a difference, even if you don't think it'll ever happen to you. There is a 100% chance that you will die at some point. I'm sorry to say. I hope that's not a news flash. To get back to the prosthetics piece itself, part of our identity is every single cell in our body. And the idea that we have cell turnover, that cells die, that our skin sloughs off and we continue to generate more things, that's a wonderful part of our existence, and it makes sure that we don't just become a used up husk by the time we're 10 years old. I'm grateful for the genetic process. I'm grateful for telomeres. You can look that up in terms of why we age, but also why we don't age immediately. And it's fairly long compared to a lot of other organisms, to be sure. Although there are some that have us beaten out. But if you end up with a disability, let's say, it could be minor. It could be, let's say 10% of what you used to do. That's still humongous. if any of us woke up the next day and said, "Oh, I can do 10% less of what I was able to yesterday morning," we would probably have a significant freak out. Let's be real with each other. Now imagine it comes with pain, it comes with surgeries, which always carry their own risk. It comes with adaptation, relearning, because your nervous system doesn't always do things exactly the way they were going to originally be formatted, because nerves don't like being cut. And that's exactly what you're doing. So you have loss, and then someone introduces the idea that you can have something that can take the place of what was gone. And on the surface, you think, in theory, that's wonderful because now you can regain that function. Except for the longest time in humanity's history, you didn't. It was purely a stand in, it was a prop. If you lost your leg and you had, and that's how these terms came about. There's a reason why it was called a peg leg. It's because it was a piece of wood that attached where your prosthetic stump is. And those things aren't exactly the most comfortable if you've ever tried to wear one. And everyone that I've talked to points out that we've gone and swung the pendulum so many times because you can get these things in so many different ways. What do I mean? You can have something that looks on the surface like a human leg, that if you're not paying attention is supposed to be the same coloration as your own natural skin tone. And yet, when people see it for the first time, it raises questions. So now it can bring up sorry. So now it can bring up old history. You can relive, let's say, a traumatic event that you didn't want to think about, just simply to have a basic discussion. Or it can be purely mechanical in purpose and not resemble a leg at all. Or it can be adapted with polycarbon fibers that are in the shape of a flipper that actually allow for a sense of resiliency, that when it touches the ground, it actually can propel you, and is actually excellent for athletes. So in that case, there was a discussion as to whether or not it's performance enhancing. So it's gone above and beyond what we would expect the human body to be able to do. We
I
now
remember, just to interject, I remember that was a big discussion um, with Oscar Pistorius,
That's right.
the South African runner who later became infamous for far more heinous acts. But when he was trying to qualify for the Olympics, there was a discussion of, does he have an advantage with his prosthetics, that because technically those blades don't fatigue in the sense that muscles do. There's no lactic acid buildup in the blades. So there was a question as to, would that give him an advantage? So that's something. And Matt is in the live stream, and he also suggested or brought up soldiers who lose limbs in combat. Is another perfect example that there's an IED or something along those lines. And I mean, that we see that all the time. And unfortunately, it's a very common experience.
That's right. And everyone has the choice. You don't have to even get a prosthetic if you don't feel comfortable doing so. And I know I was focused on legs, but that's true for arms. That's true for any length of these things. There's also the improvements in cybernetics where, yes, you actually can get, for example, replacement hands that do have a mechanical purpose, that do function like limbs, and do have a neural connection. So these things are coming down the road more and more every day. And so what used to be pure science fiction, when you look at someone like Cyborg, not so much anymore. But there's another side to this that I didn't want to leave out. And it's not just the extremities, it's not just the external transplants, replacement organs, mechanical hearts. All of these things allow a person to survive longer than they ever would have. And now they've been around for decades. However, the lengths that we have to go to make sure that people are able to tolerate those procedures, and also deal with the medications that are necessary so that they don't have their immune system turn against them, which in turn also means they have a compromised immune system and therefore have to be careful of infections. That also has become a hot topic because some people are eligible for significant renal or heart transplants, but are refused because of hospital policy that they have to get vaccinated against COVID 19. And that's the person's choice to do so. I'm not trying to come down hard one way or another with this. What I'm saying is, anytime you're involving something outside of yourself, there is a guarantee that you are dealing with something that is going to be foreign for the rest of your life. It is something that you are literally living parallel with, not just completely accepting, whether your body wants to or not. So think of the amount of resilience you have to know that you cannot miss doses, for example, for a transplant medication or risk your life. You cannot, for example, just take for granted if you have a kidney donor that you can just go about your daily business. You could just as easily be back on dialysis. And I respect anyone that has been on dialysis for more than a year or two, because that is an amazing draining process. Just to give some examples there.
Literally and figuratively.
Yes. uh, for anybody that has actually heard the click of a mechanical heart as someone is waiting for a heart transplant, and knowing that that's going to be their quote unquote heartbeat for indefinitely, however long it takes, it's something you don't just put to the wayside in your brain. You're really almost dealing with another person that's a part of you. And so when you consider the amount of energy that you have to expend just to do your daily tasks and not remind yourself of loss, because that's a form of grief. It may not be a whole person, but it's you. It's gone and it's not coming back. This is all just in that one issue. So I am always amazed when I see someone that has gone through that, by either by choice or by horrible circumstance. Either way, I bless you for being able to survive, and hopefully with whatever it is that you've been given, you're able to thrive afterwards.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, we didn't even touch on the the notion of transhumanism and the people that are seeking out um, enhancements or alterations to their body. I'll just say alterations,
Mhm.
um, as a catch-all term. But the folks that very much want to be implanted with various robotic implements or things of that nature because they feel that it's the way to the next evolution of the human race. And it's funny because next week we're going to be talking about Black Bolt, and the Inhumans and the supposed evolution of mankind and things of that nature. Um, so it's just very interesting that we're seeing applications here in the real world. Um, and Matt also says this is why the ability to 3D print biological material is something I'm paying very close attention to lately. Absolutely, because if you can 3D print biological material based on a person's own stem cells, based on a person's own genetic material, you're basically guaranteeing that you don't need, I don't want to say that you don't need any immunosuppressant medication, or you won't need any medication to address that. But if you're basically swapping out your own material with yours, then there's really no difference. And so that's going to be a game changer in terms of the prolonging of the human lifespan. And I mean, that has a whole series of bioethics, which we're not, again, going to get into because this is not that kind of a show. But I mean, bioethics is a fascinating uh, concept and discussion topic,
especially
just
for
in general.
someone who's on the co-chair who's the co-chair of a bioethics committee for a hospital.
Yes, especially for someone like that. If only we knew somebody like that. So, um, present company excluded. So the second issue then, and this is something that we had some fun discussing in the write up and just over the course of discussing this episode, is he considers acceptance of his form to be equivalent to stagnation. Victor is constantly upgrading himself, whether it's the quote unquote software or the hardware. Victor, by the nature of his character, is constantly evolving, and it's not like a character changing suits where, their outward appearance changes, but their abilities and powers still remain the same. His power set and what he can do is directly related to the changes and alterations that he makes in his hardware, which present as a function of who he is. So, and that is driven again by this notion that he's never fully done with himself. And so we're going to get into that in the in-universe treatment. But, before we get there, Doc, you can certainly expound upon that a little bit.
Yeah, and this can take many forms, both internally and externally. And let's make this clear: there is nothing wrong with self improvement, self help, uh, always striving to be better. That's a wonderful thing. We encourage everyone to do such. Okay, I want to clear that up. So now that we got that out of the way, um, there is a level of perfectionism that starts to really harm someone. Let's just go with the external. And once again, not meant to uh, insult anyone that's listening. I don't have an issue, for example, with cosmetic surgeries if a person has a certain image as to what they think is going to benefit them for multiple reasons, and they consult someone and have the proper counseling ahead of time as to what the expectations are, and they go through with it with a clear mind and appropriate resources and the support of the people that are around them and love them. That's great. If you've had your fifth surgery and you're still not satisfied with, for example, how your face looks, how your nose looks, how other parts of your body look, you've exhausted all of your financial resources to the point that you're about to declare bankruptcy, and people are actually now reacting in a way that you didn't expect, uh, saying that they don't recognize who you are anymore, then maybe there was a step too far. Not, once again, not to shame, just simply pointing out that accepting that level of feedback may have been beneficial to the point that you didn't create more problems for yourself. And you're still not satisfied with the result. That's what I'm getting at. It's body dysmorphia. That is a humongous problem, and one that unfortunately gets caught too late for the person. But it doesn't have to be about that end of it either. I know it fits in with the cyborg part because, yeah, you literally start structurally changing things. But what about the person that has an eating disorder? What about the person that is excessively dieting or exercising or using laxatives or starvation, dehydration, or conversely, they feel like they're constantly underweight and they decide that they overeat. They, just simply can't accept, but because they're not comfortable with themselves, they start shaming other people in order to try and make themselves feel better. Uh, all of those things can come into play. But what about not just the physical side? What about the mental and emotional side? What if you are an incredible perfectionist and therefore you keep trying to iterate on one version of a piece of work or a creative idea that you're doing constantly, but you actually never decide to publish because you feel like everyone's going to reject it because it doesn't meet your standards, but it would still be a great story or a great artwork that other people may enjoy and don't get the chance? What if it's a matter of things that you're doing at work that people point out you don't have to be there until 10 o'clock at night working on that project? Because let's be real, you're putting in more work than anybody else, and you're upset that nobody else matches what you do. But their point is it's because their day is done and they actually want to spend time with their family. And yet, despite all the work that you do, your boss doesn't recognize it. Not that it's bad, but they point out, yeah, you did a good job. but you didn't want a good job. You wanted it to be the best job. You wanted the recognition that it was the greatest. And therefore, because you didn't get that recognition, you classify it as a failure. And so you actually ask for a redraft of that same project, even though the rest of the company has moved on. These are examples that I'm giving that are not meant to be hypothetical because they're from my own career experience and what other patients have described to me in terms of how they have tried to deal with things in life. And the scary part is, although what I'm saying for the most part may sound very intuitive to the person that's saying them to me, they weren't saying it as a realization. They were saying it as their continued argument as to why they were correct. This is not something that is taken lightly. This is something that becomes ingrained in what the person is willing to do on a daily basis. And if it gets to that point to the detriment of every other aspect of their life, then that classifies as harmful. So, if the number one thing that you're doing whenever you're saying that you're yoga meditating each morning, and you're noticing that it's getting to the point of an obsession that you actually forget to eat, or you actually are late for appointments, or you actually don't get everything done for the kids before they go to school, then yeah, these all might be situations where having an outside view, as scary as that may be, could be the best thing, and actually doing it even if you disagree with the person. Because having that extra perspective that is not as directly intertwined with what you're doing could end up leading to a better quality of life. This is not something that qualifies per se as OCD. I don't want to give it a diagnosis like that automatically. It might classify as OCPD, as in the personality disorder, because of how intuitive it is to maintain perfectionism at all costs, because it does have its own benefits up to a point. But once again, if you find that you are truly pushing back against even those that love and support you on a regular basis, then do yourself a favor and just give yourself that extra pause and review it before going further.
Very well stated. Now I'm going to bring up Matt in the live chat brought up another point from a different perspective. Isn't it also kind of like a guy constantly getting new and better power tools for his garage or fishing gear or add-ons for his car? He said, at least in a utilitarian sense. Now, to some respect, yes, it's just a guy gear acquisition syndrome. It's about constantly needing to always have the latest, the greatest. I know a couple friends of mine are camera fiends and they're constantly buying new lenses. Our friend Brian is constantly, has to have the latest computer, the newest, gaming system, whatever it is. That there are people like that, but I think that the distinction here that Doc is drawing, and I think did a masterful job of explaining of, is because it's inherent to the person and it's not just this external thing. Because a guy getting new and better power tools for his garage still is ultimately, I don't want to say encumbered or inhibited, but he's he can have the best tools in the world. He's only as good as he is. That a good craftsman can work regardless of the tools. He's still ultimately inhibited by who he is and what he can do with those tools. Victor, on the other hand, can change so much about himself and what he can do by changing a part of who he is, literally. And I think there's a major distinction there, both from, again, the external perspective and also the internal perspective.
And to add to that, though, I do see though where that could be a concern, where it gets to the point that even the acquisition of new things becomes its own thing. And if you are at the point where you have the classic hoarder house where you can't move, you can't even have a pathway to your door because there's just so much stuff built up over that one particular topic, or you're losing sleep to the point that you're deprived because you're constantly using the items that you got, be it new technology or anything that you shop for or anything that you work on, even if it doesn't cost money, if it's just music, but the neighbors are now complaining because it's 4 in the morning and they've had to hear you blasting out your latest stuff from your soundtrack. That still can really cause problems. I don't want to make it sound like, oh, it's just the money side, or oh, it's just the possession side, or oh, it's just the emotional side, or oh, it's just the behavioral side. It's all of it. All of it. Any of it in excess for the sake of what you consider to be the best, and it's just destroying everything else around it. I think that's bad.
I can't disagree with that at all. So the third issue that we're going to discuss, because I think we can go back and forth on that, um, ad infinitum. So I want to move on to the third one, his relationship with his father. Now, I said it has improved, at least in the new 52, it has improved, but there are still deep-seated trust issues because of everything going on. And I think this was one of the things that was done very well in the Justice League movie, specifically in the Snyder cut. And I know as soon as I say those words, I'm going to have the Twitter army coming after me, making sure that I dare not speak any ill towards that film whatsoever. Which I thought was okay, but I did appreciate the expansion of Victor's storyline, specifically with respect to his relationship with Silas. Um, and I just thought that that was very well done because it showed you how Victor and Silas they 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 didn't quite connect, and it wasn't until after the accident that Silas realized what he had lost and what he wasn't spending time on. And so there's a lot of regret from Silas's part, and on Victor's part. That resentment there is starting to fade. It still exists, and I don't know that it's ever fully going to go away. But it's a very interesting topic to discuss.
I think you hit on the major word there with regret. Uh, First of all, I'll admit I have a unique take on regret that's evolved over the years, and it's probably pretty controversial, but I still think it's worth putting out there in the universe. And if it needs reiteration or iteration, as I should say, to change the nuance of it, so be it. Regret is the idea that you have pushed the boundaries as to what you would consider acceptable in your life, and it had a negative consequence. Saying it that way allows for someone to take chances. If you don't want regrets, then know ahead of time exactly how things are going to work and pick the best thing that you're going to enjoy. There you go, problem solved. Except we're not in that world. We have the future being unknown, and we have variables that are known and unknown, and most of them are not controllable. So I don't think regret is as horrible as we make it sound, but it is something that we tend to avoid because having too much of it may mean that you took too many chances and therefore you are putting yourself at greater risk than you should have, both physically, mentally, emotionally, all of it. In the case of a father and son, and honestly, any close relationship, I don't want to just limit this to father and son. There are going to be opportunities to strengthen that bond, and any opportunity that doesn't strengthen it, by definition, is going to weaken it because that's the nature of what time and distance does. This is an active process. And the biggest impact that Silas had on his son, well, it's two basically. It's the fact that he's born. I'm sorry, I'm not going to give a play by play on that. That's not my role. But it's when he's saved. And if we're going to go with the second one, which I'm sure we are, then it's fascinating to know how Victor views it compared to how Silas views it. Silas's point is, and this is going to hit heavy probably for some people that thinks of certain topics this way, life at all costs. Meanwhile, on several occasions, Victor's point is quality at all costs. They do not have to be in opposition of each other, but they are going to create some very tense and awkward discussions. So I'm not going to go by the dramatic comic book version of this because most people aren't going to have a person in their family that's going to have the technology to save their life in that type of situation by their own hand. But they are going to have situations where you're going to have to make difficult choices as to how you want to live. It doesn't have to be about health either. It can be as simple as your location. How far away from the family are you going to be? You're really moving out to 500 miles away when no one else in the family lives more than 50 away from each other? You're really going to take a completely different job and field somewhere else, and you're going to just abandon us? That's how some family members may feel. Meanwhile, there may be some family members that say, "Wow, I wish I did that when I was your age." Good for you for taking that chance. I'm sorry I can't be there in person, but I got your back. Just make sure that you call her right once in a while. Everybody has different perspectives on those sorts of things. But especially when it comes to decisions that are not easily reversible, especially when it comes to, let's get back into the healthcare, when it comes to end of life. What do you mean when we're all making this decision in the ICU that your your siblings said they wouldn't want life-saving measures? Why would they say that? That that sounds barbaric. On the other hand, wait, you're telling me that this person that I spent my entire life with, my own spouse, they were a teenager when they wrote that they wanted everything possible done and every machine hooked up and all of that. They've lived a great life. They wouldn't want this, but it's the last thing that's written down. And that's what the staff is saying that they're going to go with in terms of the decision. And what about the person that actually goes through a lot of things, survives it, and now can tell you after the fact? And now we really are getting back straight to the comic. I don't agree with the decision that was made. How do you move forward from that? How do you consciously say to yourself, I, in my current state of mind, with all of the emotional influence that happened at the time, I wanted to do right by you, and you are now telling me that it was wrong. Do you still want to associate with that person? Do you still trust that person to do that again? You can always change your mind when you survive, and there may be resentment about that. How dare you question the fact that I had the opportunity for you to see one more sunrise and sunset? The idea that you still got to see people that are important to you because I gave you a chance when, in theory, I could have just withheld the Narcan like you told me to. These are the types of things that people deal with. And even if they're not thinking of it in the moment, oh, they are definitely thinking about it every day, week, month, and year, decade, and the rest of their lifetime because of those things. And when you break it down like that, I don't know a single person that is going to be able to get through life, because I know that trope, I know that stereotype, that cliche, live life with no regrets. That is a tall order. And if you seriously have never once pushed that boundary where you said, you know what, I think I can make either the quality of life or the quantity of life just a little bit better and just a little bit longer, then I would question whether or not you really would have had an opportunity for any regrets in the first place.
Wow. That is incredibly powerful. And I, as I've said before, and as longtime fans know, I'm on the side, I'm an attorney who does estate planning, and I have to help people write up DNRs, and I have to help people write up living wills, advanced health directives, and things of that nature. And these are the kinds of things that have to be discussed, that have to be thought about. That if you're diagnosed with something terminal and then, on the way out, oh, by the way out, I have cancer, I have 6 months to live, and then 2 months later, I have a heart attack. Is it worth bringing them back? For what? That's to your point. What's the quality of life going to be? What's the quantity of life going to be? These are not easy questions to ponder at all. Certainly not from someone who was brought back that may or may not have wanted to be brought back in, say, a vegetative state. We can talk about that, in terms of a real world analog. Yes, the person is physically alive, but they're functionally brain dead or they have diminished capacity. And I'm not here to get into a religious or philosophical or an ethical argument about some of those considerations, but there's something to be said about the idea that, it at that point you're just uh, a shell of a body, and is that really worth living? And that's, like I said, a question for another podcast. Excuse me. That's a question for another podcast. That's a question for people a hell of a lot smarter than I am. But you do raise some amazing points. And I hope that at the very least, our listeners have some food for thought when it comes to making decisions about a DNR, about advanced health directives and things of that nature, because they're questions that we all have to answer at some point. As you said, it's a 100% chance we're going to die. It's just a question of when. And hopefully for me, I've got a long, long time to think about that. So we are going to take a pause. We're going to plug our sponsor, BetterHelp. And when we get back, we'll get into treatment. Stay tuned. I was going to run real fast and grab some water because I'm out.
Okay. Yeah, this whole thing is a topic near and dear to my heart. I know this isn't a part of the podcast itself, but since we're live, figured I might as well fill the air a little bit. Yeah, it's fascinating to. I was just filling dead air, I was just saying it's fascinating where everything could be written down. A person could have the proper forms, you know, POA, advanced directives, pulsed form, which is probably the most vital for healthcare. But the point is, have all the forms, and yet the moment comes and family has to make a decision. Medical team is with them with those types of decisions, and it's still just an immense struggle because of everything that's involved.
Was that directed at anyone or?
No, like I said, I was just filling the time because if people are gonna listen to a live stream, might as well.
And Janine, my mom had a catastrophic brain aneurysm at 41. No one knew what she wanted. Oof, that's harsh.
Yeah. Yeah.
Matt, just let me skydive without a parachute into my open grave. That's the way I want to go.
In that case, forget regrets, man. You just need accuracy.
Yeah, right. I'm reminded, what was that? The Jack Candy thing. I want to die peacefully in my sleep like my grandfather, not screaming in terror like his passengers.
Yep.
Yeah. Let me, I don't want to think about how I go because that shit terrifies me.
I know that's always been your thing.
Nope. I'm afraid of
I've
two things in this life: death and ladders. That's it.
Alrighty.
And back in three, two, and we're back. So treatment in universe for Cyborg, and the thing that we were talking about earlier, yeah, and the thing that we were talking about earlier, specifically with respect to acceptance of his form and stagnation, I think is going to play a key role in how Doc understands and goes forward with treatment. So I'm very curious to see where we're going to go with this.
Yeah. So if I'm dealing with a guy that is this much into tech, and at this point the technology is a part of him, it's not just the hardware side because I know that could be a big focus. I'm much more on the software and programming side where that takes a lot of effort, and there's a reason they're called languages. It allows for this hybrid of what the human brain is capable of versus what you can do with machines, electricity, and pretty much ones and zeros because that's all it comes down to. So this is not my area of expertise. I want to learn how to code. I want to know what he's most comfortable with because how you write something is often the best expression of your soul. And I know we don't talk about that necessarily when you think of programming, but really that's what you're doing. You're giving life to something that otherwise wouldn't exist. And it's one of the most creative things you could ever do. So that's what Cyborg has been trying to do with himself for the longest time. And as we already hinted at, is it just to continue with modest self improvement that is productive for everyone around? And if so, then I love how Anthony came up with this. I won't take full credit. Has he ever gone gold? Is he always in the alpha and beta versions? Because that implies that you're never quite ready for prime time. Like, no, 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 no. You've been doing a lot of great hero work. You have definitely made friends. You've done so much. Come on, man. Go ahead. Have your true, don't just worry about CES and what's coming in the future. Like have your actual model on the shelves. This is who you are. This is what it is, and go ahead and show it. It's great. It's wonderful. Be proud. Don't just be proud of what can be. Be proud of what you are now. And that's true for a lot of us, but we'll get into the other side of that when we talk about out of universe. But I thought in universe, I just think that would be super cool because I get to learn something useful. He gets to be a teacher, which is one of the best ways you could still improve yourself. As a matter of fact, in the healthcare field, we say see one, do one, teach one. When we know in reality it's more like see a whole bunch, do a few, and teach forever. But whatever, it still stands. But in addition to that, he actually maybe gets more comfortable with the now.
Matt says, "Dear Lord, Cyborg is Activision." Because the whole time I was thinking, as you're describing this, I was like, yeah, he's never satisfied. He's this, that. Yeah, he's a AAA game that he's going to go gold, but there's a day one patch, and then there's a couple weeks down the line there's another bug update, and then there's DLC, and then there's more stuff. To say nothing of loot boxes and you know all that garbage. But yes, that was the analogy that we came up with, and when we were typing this out, I was like, has he ever gone gold? Or would he ever consider going gold? Which, unfortunately, in this day and age, I don't even know if that's a term anymore because I know it used to be when games would or when software would physically ship onto the shelf. Now everything is downloadable and software as a service exists. So nothing's ever really done. It's just the latest iteration before the next one, before the next one, before the next one. So you and I have kind of just dated ourselves in that respect because that's a concept that doesn't really exist anymore, at least in this day and age.
Yeah.
But out of universe, I know, we talked a lot about real world analogs for things, but essentially what this boils down to is he's a multi amputee with family relationship issues. I mean, there's a lot more to it than that, but if you want to boil it down to its simplest form, that's the real world analog for Cyborg. And Victor, still, even without the superpower stuff, there's a lot of trauma there. Just there's no other way to describe it. It is trauma, and he's got to learn to work with that.
Yeah, so there have been some very humanistic techniques when it comes to this type of trauma, specifically the grief associated with it. Because some of us may find parts of this bizarre if you take it out of context, but has anyone ever had a funeral for their arm or their leg? Has anyone ever had a separate service for when their kidney shut down? Uh, just even saying it, it's like, don't really think of it that way, but that's how big the loss is. It really is. And no, I'm not advocating that you have to do it that way, but I do think you have to give it that level of concern. And the fear that sometimes creeps in for people is that, well, if I do that, then I'm basically just waiting for my death, like piece by piece. And that's clearly not what we're intending. But there is a comfort in the idea that your changes are going to be acceptable to you, that it's okay to lay rest to your past life, and the adaptations that you've made and the progress that you made are a constant tribute, an homage to what you had before. That way, every day is an opportunity for you to continue to pay tribute to what you were able to do before. There's nothing wrong with those types of changes. And I know we just spent, the last 15, 20 minutes just talking about how you shouldn't just constantly look for the perfection in every single part of the future and enjoy the moment. Well, at the same time, in order for you to enjoy the present, that also means that you have to lay rest to the past. So we're tying all of this together. When it comes to that type of grief, it may be beneficial to journal that you've actually had things that you already accomplished, that if it weren't for the fact that you had that in the first place, you would have never done. In other words, and this, don't get me wrong, this doesn't work for everyone, but what would this have been like if you literally were born without that particular appendage or that particular part of your body? Think about that, because you're able to adapt now because other parts of your body are still there. And therefore, the fact that, for example, let's say we gave the example, if you're a combat veteran, that means that you are able to serve proudly and with great proficiency and duty because everyone saw what you had at the moment, and they're willing to honor the fact that you made a sacrifice that many people would never have even taken the opportunity to, for the benefit of humanity at large. So there is a sense of gratitude towards the effort, even if it comes with significant pain and loss. Man, oh man, it's hard to hold those two thoughts at the same time. And that's pretty much why having someone on the outside pointing these things out in different moments can be really beneficial. Also, I'm going to get a little more granular and a little more practical than I tend to do, and let people know that for some reason it became chic many years ago when it came to these types of injuries to simply say, okay, you're going to have to live with this pain. And I know the pendulum had swung very far the other way and pointed out, well, there are ways to manage pain. And through many different situations, it ended up with the use of medications a bit beyond what would have been feasible for a proper system, so that we didn't end up with the crisis that we have now. I'm not putting all the blame squarely in one area, but I'm willing to acknowledge it. But there are safe ways to manage pain above and beyond just medications. There's also therapy techniques that can help with that. Physical therapy is still the number one way that people generate the greatest practical use for if they've had a loss of limb. There's also um, the same type of mindfulness and abilities to reframe what you have now and the modifications that can be made that allow a person to pretty much do everything that they need to in life without having the loss of function, even if they have the loss of that physical part. Um, Setting boundaries of expectations is another part of it. This is all usually multifactorial and more than one person, because obviously a single psychiatrist, counselor, social worker is not going to be doing all of this the same way one physical therapist, one surgeon, you know, is going to not have to see the person and do all of the necessary routines, or the researcher that is trying to make things as close to our accepted typical reality as possible when it comes to modern technology. So my takeaway for all of this and for this episode as a whole is, as I said, there is a reason we live in the present. It's because tomorrow is unknown and yesterday is gone.
And tomorrow is not even guaranteed.
Yeah.
That's why they call it the present, because every day is a gift. It's cliche, but it's true. So, with all that being said, and with the help of Carrington from the Real Dudes podcast, we're going to get Victor Stone on Dr. Issues' couch. All right.
Okay.
Oh, that neck pop felt really good. All right, go ahead.
Okay. In 3, 2. Hello, Victor. I'm Dr. Issues.
Hey, Doc, let's do this. I'm all in.
Okay. Okay.
Here's a list of the last 3 angry outbursts I've had within the past month. I've also included my vitals, my calorie count, and I have a full database of the last 30 years of psychotherapeutic and psychotropic recommendations by the American Psychiatric Association for diagnoses in the DSM and the ICD 10, 11, and 12.
There is no ICD 12 yet.
I have my ways.
But you don't even know what your diet.
I have taken the MMPI inventory, and the standard deviation of error after multiple runs is within an acceptable range for any PhD, PsyD, MD, or DO with an acceptable clinical certification. I also cross-referenced any abnormal responses with screening exams for depression, ADHD, psychosis, addiction, and monitored all my hormonal levels to make sure there were no underlying physiological causes.
You don't need to screen yourself for addictions unless someone else.
The Titans say I'm addicted to tech, but they don't live with it like I do. I'm showing them that I'm in full control of myself. And thanks to this research, I found a way to use Monte Carlo simulations for how likely I am to have an emotional response at any moment. I never thought about the human brain like this before, but I can modify my eye to be a functional MRI device if I could just find the proper shielding around my own body.
What the fuck? That is dangerous and not fully diagnostic yet. I love the enthusiasm, but how do I put this? Back off, can't you?
I thought my grunt work would make this easy for you. I mean, I'm willing to undergo pharmacogenetic testing for the best medication. Isn't this what you do?
No. Yes. Well, it's complicated.
I know. It took me a few if it took me a few all-nighters to get the reams of data necessary for an introductory session, I can't imagine what you have to do for multiple patients every day of the week.
You want to know what I do? Honestly?
Yeah. I mean, I'll admit I thought this was all psychobabble nonsense, but there's some real rigor behind neuroscience.
I talk to people and they talk back to me. I make suggestions based on that information along with the biological and social components and repeat that process with the patient's input.
That does sound like psychobabble nonsense. I mean, look, I can get you a copy of my last schematic.
Please tone it down. I'm begging at this point. Look, I'm impressed by your efforts, but it's clear to me that you have no other format for viewing yourself. You're incredibly smart. You're laser focused. No pun intended. You realize that others think something is up, and yet you double down on what you know. You're isolating yourself and you don't even know it.
The hell I am. I've been a key component in some of the most important events in human history, universe history. You don't know me.
There's that anger you mentioned.
So my cortisol level.
Nope, nope. Don't care.
Say what?
Dude, just talk to me. How are you? How are those you care about? What's your favorite food?
This isn't a date.
Not like that. But it is a human interaction of getting to know one another. Please, just stick to the basics.
Nah, man, if you don't recognize I'm Linux all the way.
Say something not related to research or tech. Now.
Sorry, Doc, gotta reboot a few things.
No, you're not avoiding this. I realize this is all a smokescreen now. Ever heard the phrase, if you can't dazzle them with your brilliance, then baffle them with your bullshit? Well, sir, you've managed to create the ultimate bullshit brilliance hybrid. Drop it.
Damn, you cut real deep with that, man. I'm not sure this is gonna work out.
Why not? Are you willing to do something that doesn't have a treasure trove of data to mine? Actually, I think it's the opposite. You get the chance to. Actually, I think it's the opposite. You get the chance to look at your own personal black box that's been hard coded into your psyche. The more you're willing to let go, the greater the likelihood of a new finding.
You really want to do this without downloading the latest?
I don't care. I don't care unless you talk about your father.
Well, I'm sure you can Google his name. Man, just let it go, will you? That's the problem with practitioners of soft sciences. They fall back on outdated formatting. Are you supposed to be like Freud 2.0 or something?
Only if you're Cyborg Plus.
I don't understand. I mean, I'm not video streaming or anything. I was kind of expecting you to say Cyborg 2022 or something.
No, I mean, look, there's nothing wrong with being comfortable. I apologize for my frustration. Look, you dig technology. Sweet. It's vital for you, clearly. But what else makes you who you are? You don't have to answer that for me.
Just myself. Yeah. My dad was the same way, just colder. At least I'm around people that can make me feel good once in a while. I mean, that's a nice situation, you know? Not trying to rain on their parades. I can't sit around watching TV or doing endless workouts or something like that. I mean, have you ever heard of a dude turning into a dog just so he can lick his own nuts? Beast Boy is a sick fuck. I mean, I like making a difference, but I can always be better. I'm not sure anyone understands that.
That was the best thing you said this entire time. It seemed really tough. Does get easier. Definitely gets easier.
You're opening my mind, Doc.
Thanks.
Yeah, I should have been downloading Beck and Alice instead of just philosophical stoics when I was younger. I mean, I can do a PubMed search with the proper tags as soon as I leave. Or I could just journal for 5 minutes tonight.
You're catching on. I'll see you next session. I trust you've already logged it on your calendar.
Booyah.
All right.
We still need the recommended reading.
Yeah. Let me see. You know, honestly, I liked it's not really a cyborg centric thing, but I really liked Blackest Night. Because it involves a lot of the Teen Titans, and basically they pretty much they were dealing with all of the resurrected dead, and pretty much had to make it through, and that's where you kind of see more of the, forget the cyborg part, just like the whole like, man, this is just messed up stuff, and I am just going to use everything in my power, like whatever I have to do, and just keep doing things on the fly. Like it really was the best of him, in my opinion.
Okay. Um,
I wish I knew which particular books it was. I'm sorry.
let's see. Best Cyborg Comics. Of course, Screen Rant has a whole article on it. Um,
See, and that's the thing. I'm just pulling it up off the top of my head. I Cyborg's not exactly a person I pull for,
no, I know. Um, I'm gonna go with Blackest Night is the Requiem for a Dream of Comics. Wonderful story, but you only need to read it once.
See, I appreciate that. I appreciate that. It's dark, but that's because that's what I like. So
I'm going to go with Blackest Night and JLA Titans. Blackest Night for all
okay,
that stuff, and JLA Titans for the Siberian.
okay.
And then also, let me look up Real Dudes Podcast. See where there? RealDudesPodcast.com. Okay. All right. Well, thanks again to Carrington for playing the role of Victor. You can check out the Real Dudes Podcast at realdudespodcast.com. And they're available pretty much everywhere you find podcasts. They are an indie video game podcast. They talk about video games, specifically indie ones. I mean, they'll go into some big studio titles, but they tend to focus on the smaller ones and show the indies some love. Because as we said before, Activision doesn't really need any more money that they can just spend on a title that gets thrown out half finished with a day one download. And I'm not going to get on that soapbox any more than I need to. So, recommended reading. We've got two stories. Blackest Night is Doc's recommendation. It's not a cyborg centric story, but it does involve the Titans a lot. And as Doc says, Victor and the other Titans have to basically do everything that they can to deal with all of the resurrected, now Black Lanterns, zombie characters essentially coming back from the dead. The other one is JLA Titans, and this is the where a lot of the Siberian stuff happens. So it's a very Victor centric story. So we'll have links to all that stuff in the show notes. So next episodes, Black Bolt, then Echo. And just to clarify, because I forgot to mention this at the start of the episode, technically we were supposed to do Echo this week. We're still working on finding a deaf podcaster or a hard of hearing podcaster to come on and collaborate with us. And so we said we'd rather push it back and do the episode right rather than just cramming it to fit an arbitrary deadline. So we shuffled the schedule a little bit. So that's why we're doing Echo a little bit later. And then the 150th episode, Spectacular. So get those questions in. Get those either via email or tweet or Discord, however it is that you want to get us the questions to ask us anything. We'll have a fun little mailbag. And like I said, we've got a couple of other extra special surprises. So as always, you can find all of our episodes on our website, capesonthecouch.com. And we're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Capes on the Couch. And we've got links to all that stuff in the show notes so that you don't actually have to type all that stuff out. It's just available to click. And if you really enjoyed the show and you want to support it, go to patreon.com/Capes on the Couch, and you can subscribe and unlock additional content, early access, uncensored material, and some trade paperback reviews as well that Doc and I need to get off our asses and get back on to. So all that being said, Doc?
If you go through life like a cyborg, you're going to be accused of having a heart of stone. So show your human side and ensure yourself that you'll be a victor.
Masterful. Absolutely masterful. I marvel every week at how you do that. But I do see how you pull it off. For Doc Issues, I'm Anthony Sitko. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week. All right. Save that. And then a new multi-track session. All right. Default stereo input, set that. All right. Let me just take my water. I'm recording on Audition, by the way.
Gotcha.
You know, and I didn't even make the joke like I thought I was going to.
What?
Well, I suppose I could do it now. I'd be like, well, it's February. It's Black History Month. Last week we did
I
Cyborg.
see.
Now we're doing Black Bolt.
Oh my
Womp
god.
womp.
Yeah. Oh god. Uh, uh.
All right. Are you recording?
Yes.
Okay. In 3, 2, 1. All right. And let me get that. Let me switch over to. That says the Paul Jenkins J. Lee run of Inhumans is the other essential reading apart from the Stan Lee Jack Kirby arc in Fantastic Four. I would agree, although, and I know this is going to sound sacrilegious, I'm not that crazy about J. Lee's art. I know. You can shoot daggers at me. It's not my thing. Like, I appreciate it. I acknowledge it for what it is. It's not my thing. It fits the story, but it's a little too out there because like the colors blend into the edges. It's weird. It's just weird. It's not my thing. Like I said, I appreciate it, but not my thing. And I think we did recommend that. We did that as the recommended reading for the Medusa episode. But in any case, let's see. All right, here we go. And 3, 2. Hello and welcome to Capes on the Couch, where comics get counseling. I'm Anthony Sitko.
And I'm Dr. Issues.
This is issue number 148. And, it's February. It's Black History Month. So last week we did Cyborg, and this week we're doing Black Bolt. He's not black, but he's got black in his name.
I feel like there's some major societal repercussions about that, but it's a little beyond me right now.
Hashtag Inhuman Lives Matter.
Oh wow. And this concludes Capes on the Couch Run. Thank you, everyone. We've
just been canceled. So a quick reminder to get those questions into us for the 150th episode mailbag /AMA. You can send them to us via email at capesonthecouch@gmail.com, or you can tweet them to us along with your hate mail, and or send us a Facebook DM. And also, before we get into the meat and potatoes of this episode, if you haven't already, go back and listen to episode 68 on Medusa, Black Bolt's wife, for a better understanding of their dynamic. And that is going to come into play, particularly as it relates to the skit when we get to that point. So, Blackagar Boltagon is his full name, which is just so ridiculous. So ridiculous. But Black Bolt, created by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby in Fantastic Four, number 45, December of 1965. Black Bolt is the king of the Inhumans. So he was exposed to Terrigen mists in utero because his parents were geneticists on the High Council of the Inhuman People. And his voice has the ability to create massive destructive waves of energy because it manipulates electrons in some fashion. I forget exactly how that plays out. So he was placed in a soundproof chamber and taught to control his voice even while sleeping. And this happens from birth, that literally from the time he is born until he's about 19 years old, he is trained copiously every day to not make a sound, not a cough, not a sneeze, not a not a clearing of the throat, nothing, nothing. All right, this guy makes Marcel look like a chump. Um, so he re-enters in human society at 19, and his brother Maximus, who we really do need to do one of these days, and I think we
Oh
said
yeah.
that in the Medusa episode.
Oh yes.
So Maximus makes a deal with the Kree to take over the Inhuman Society. So Black Bolt shouts at the Kree ship, which crashes on the Inhuman Parliament, killing his parents. The sound also drives Maximus mad, and he swears revenge on Black Bolt. So he ends up engaged to his distant cousin Medusa, who would visit him in confinement, and they fell in love because this is, some ancient European corollary type stuff where, yeah, that's okay. Cousins can get married and become members of the royal family. That's not creepy at all. So he and Medusa oversee the assimilation of human of so he and Medusa oversee the assimilation of Inhumans into the larger world and engage with many heroes and villains in the universe, because previously they had been kind of not necessarily sequestered or isolated, but they were keeping themselves separate from the rest of humanity to more observe, and they were living in their enlightened society, which has its own caste problems and things of that nature. So he has a child with Medusa in defiance of the genetic council, who believed that his bloodline was too dangerous to continue. So he gave up his crown to be with his son, Ahura. And but he regains the crown, and he helps the Inhumans resettle on the blue area of the moon. Um, And so then he was a member of the Illuminati, which is a secret group of highly intelligent and powerful individuals that attempted to manipulate events in the Marvel 616 universe from behind the scenes. This came to the forefront in World War Hulk when they exiled Hulk from the planet and Bruce came back seeking revenge. It was later revealed that this was actually a Skrull imposter and the real Black Bolt had been kidnapped sometime before, hashtag because comics. So he plays a major role in Infinity, as he was the one who discovered Thanos' plan to kill his son Thane, who also had some inhuman genes. So in Inhumans versus X-Men, Black Bolt's use of his sonic scream on Cyclops is what kicked off the major war, except it was actually a mental projection of Cyclops created by Emma Frost, as Scott had died due to the exposure to the Terrigen mists, because Scott is a dick. And in the death of the Inhumans, he has his throat slit by Vox, who's one of the main villains of the story, but he's still able to use his scream to escape imprisonment and join the royal family in attacking the Kree. This has permanently damaged his voice, however, and I really glossed over a ton of the storylines. A lot of interactions with the Fantastic Four, a lot of interactions with the Avengers. Black Bolt, as the head of the Inhuman royal family, has played a prominent role in pretty much every Inhuman storyline that has existed over the past 60 years. But if you want to do a major deep dive on the Inhumans, go check out Geek History Lesson podcast, or go find read up on fandom. There's a whole extensive write up on Black Bolt's history. We're not that kind of show. We wanted to get into the issues, and since this is a Matt selected episode, he has a lengthy write up of his own.
Woohoo!
Um,
I'm serious. I get so excited about this.
Oh, I know. I love Matt's write ups every time. And I'm not just saying that because he's in the live stream listening. So the theme for the issues is communication. And we're going to get to that in just a sec. But Matt's write up, Black Bolt, Blackagar Boltagon. From the first time I read the classic Lee Kirby Fantastic Four run, he has always fascinated me. The basic building block of social interaction among humans, and insofar as we know Inhumans, is speech. From a philosophical standpoint, there is no organized society without verbal communication. It's everything. It is the singular most important element that serves to bring people together to work as one for a common purpose. So you take a person who, it's not like he's unable to speak through deafness from birth, restricting his ability to absorb what speech should sound like, or throat cancer, or an injury to the larynx, or something similar, preventing his vocal cords from functioning properly. He is fully capable of exercising that most basic tenement of social interaction. But if he utters even the slightest whisper, even by accident, If he coughs or sneezes, he can destroy everything and everyone around him. There's no established canon limit on what the power of his voice can actually accomplish, but everyone pretty much understands even the slightest sound from him is potentially catastrophic, as if going through life from birth having to engage in so much rigorous physical and psychological training to never utter a sound, not even accidentally in your sleep, wouldn't create enough issues for you. Let's add on to that. You're the king of an entire race of people entrusted with all the responsibilities of governing and the expectations of leadership that entails. Oh, and you accidentally killed the primary support system you had in your parents when you found your brother forging a pact with the aliens who were directly responsible for your powers and understandably lashed out. Holy crap. How the man didn't become a gibbering wreck with a death wish as soon as he was old enough to fully grasp all this stuff is the stuff of miracles. I think the fact that Black Bolt even functions at all, much less as well as he does given the circumstances, is a testament to just how well the guy's got it all together. So let's try to run down what I'm sure is not a complete list of this man's issues. And the first one, severe isolation. Your Terrigenesis turned you into a potential weapon of mass destruction on a civilization-ending scale. You spent most of your life from that point on having to be in complete isolation from others and undergoing rigorous physical and psychological training to never utter the slightest of sounds with your voice, even by accident. Just communicating yourself, your feelings, your wants, and your needs to other people is a grueling exercise at best. You have to constantly make yourself understood to others in a way they typically don't. Think of all the things this implies. Doc, take it away.
My goodness. So just even hearing that, because I'll be very honest, I didn't get a chance to read this ahead of time. So as Anthony is saying it to me and I'm reading on our notes, this is my first exposure to it. And that was even overwhelming for me to even comprehend. So let's piece it out. A person that is capable of speech, but for whatever reason has to remain silent. That is not something that is easily done. If you don't believe me, please go to your local school safely, not trespassing, and just observe any of the classes. And by the way, I don't just mean elementary school. I don't just mean middle school. I don't just mean junior high or high school. I also mean college. I also mean graduate schools. It's every school I've ever been in. Professors that are younger than some of the students have to tell them to be quiet while they're talking. It is human nature for us to simply say what is on our minds. Not everything, but there is always considered a certain amount of chatter that's supposed to happen because that is pretty much our currency. I'm not talking money. I'm saying that's pretty much how society gets anything done. And thankfully we found ways to extend the use of it thanks to everyone looking at this live stream, thanks to everyone listening to this podcast. Thanks for Matt for writing this down. So, yes, we do come across things that are shortcuts, but it doesn't have the one thing in the way that we would really want it that we just can't match, and that's emotion. So, a key component to this, when you take away a person's voice that has one, we're talking traditional ability to speak, you aren't able to use emotion the same way. And think for yourself, when you've typed something out angrily and you're bashing the keys or writing with a pen and you start to get an almost arthritic feeling in your wrist, or maybe that's just me, or no one's around and you decide that you're just going to yell out because you figure, well, at least nobody's going to hear it. It's still not the same. You want the response. You want to see the person's face. You want to hear the other person's voice. You want to hear the content. You want all of it. You want reciprocity. That's basically what you want. You want to acknowledge that there is someone else that has a similarity to me, that even if they don't agree with a single thing that I say, they've at least heard it. And that's been eliminated from the start. How emotionally stunting would that be? In theory, because Black Bolt is not written that way. Thank goodness for his sake. But the idea also, and this is much more metaphorical because we don't really encounter this specific circumstance, but we know that words have meaning and we know that words have power. And knowing that you have to bite your tongue, you have to make sure that every word that you say is properly couched, that you have to be diplomatic. You sometimes may come across as wishy washy, or sometimes you have to play up that you're a straight shooter and you just get down to business. You change the inflection of your tone, you change your mannerisms, you change your posture, all of it. Anthony and I do this for the sake of the podcast when we're doing the skits. And so far, the feedback has been positive because it's a way for us to once again show emotion. Take all of that and mix the idea that you have to remain silent for the sake of either it could be for secrecy, let's say for more real purposes, not just comics, or because you have to wait for the right moment, whatever. And you don't really get the opportunity to have the emotional outlet that that would allow you to have. Oh boy, that in my opinion, that can lead to a lot of resentment. That can lead to a lot of disgust, a lot of anger. Going on for too long, that could lead to a lot of depression, self-inflicted isolation. I mean, that gets back to Matt's point with that side of it. Because when people do that too much, it doesn't sound like a choice anymore. It sounds like a conscious, you know, just reality of life that people don't have to listen to you because you just don't have anything to say. And that's really scary.
Yeah, absolutely. He also brings up in the live chat, how many times have we all tried to be sarcastic over text or online and it didn't land as such? That was my entire relationship with my one ex-girlfriend. I was making jokes and she was like, "What is that supposed to mean?" It was a joke. And now I have to explain it, which means it's not funny. And then we get into an argument because why are you making those comments? Why are you trying to be sarcastic? Because this is who I am. And that's why we lasted all of 6 weeks because I was like, I can't spend my life doing this with someone. Either you get it or you don't. But I mean, it's the truth. There's so much, there that if you're constantly having to fight to be understood, you're just going to withdraw because you think people don't get you. And unfortunately, we see so much of that now online. I say it's a lot of what makes up some of these horrible online communities. I'm not because I'm not going to name any specific ones, but they gather together because they feel that no one else understands them and that they need to seek out like-minded people. And it leads to some frightening and potentially horrible things being said and or done because of that. Um, and I'm talking like really really deep stuff. I'm not being as I'm not trying to throw shade on anybody. I'm speaking in about specific communities, but I'm trying not to name names because I don't want to give them any more light or credibility than I think they need to. Um, but in any case, yeah, really, really horrifying stuff when you think about the analogs to all of that. So the second one, and again, Matt, crippling guilt at the very real consequences your powers have brought. You don't have to imagine what will happen if you slip up. You know full well. You killed your parents with your voice. You didn't mean to. It was an accident, but it happened. You have a family, you have a wife, you have people that you care about who will absolutely be reduced to a fine pink mist by a weapon that is of your person, your very essence of being that you have almost no control over. That is a gorgon that will haunt your soul forever. The guilt over what he has done and what he is capable of from the slightest thing. He, most of us operate with some room of there's wiggle room. There's a leash that we're not beholden as soon as something is done. Well, that's it. That's it. There's there's a buffer there. So we can act and we can maneuver, understanding that even if we push too far, we can come back and address it. There'll be repercussions, of course, but they're not going to be world ending. Black Bolt does not have the luxury of any buffer, of any freedom whatsoever. He has lived it and he continues to live it on a daily basis.
I have to be very careful with this because I have to protect uh, people's rights, so I can't give many details. Offline, I've had this conversation with Anthony about a particular situation, mainly for my own psyche, because there is no great way to deal with these things. But I'm just going to just point directly to consequence. So I'm going to use a slightly different example. Once again, just changing details. I've had patients that have done some horrible things, and that includes a situation where human tragedy has happened. I'm just going to leave it at that. There was genuine remorse for things that have happened, and there are other circumstances above and beyond what I'm going to get into detail about. But I can tell you that person basically says every day that they wake up, they realize that it's not just whether or not it's a gift, it's a burden, because they're alive and someone else is not. And it's literally a one for one trade in their mind. And it's a horrible thing that they have to, in theory, put themselves through every single day for the rest of their life. So the idea that there have been negative consequences because of actions is one thing, and that's bad enough. Let's say it's in the matter of the line of duty. Let's say it's a matter of a police officer that shoots someone. Let's say it's, just an unfortunate situation. If you're a truck driver and someone in the dead of night, not because you were speeding, you're following all regulations, the other person is drunk, stumbles into the road, and you hit them, and they end up with severe injuries, not even a matter of death. There's been no evidence to show that you did any wrongdoing, but you now have to get back in your rig for that next time. Anytime you see a pedestrian that even comes close to the sidewalk, like veering off, not necessarily because they're trying to swerve, go into you or anything, but can you imagine the thoughts that a person has at that moment? Just trying to recognize that the things that we take for granted sometimes in what our day-to-day activities are supposed to be, or the emotional responses that we have to really continue to try and synergize and tie all these things together, since we're talking about communication, all of this is supposed to go off without a hitch because it normally does. These are often outlier situations, and yet the greatest fear is what if? What if it happens again? What if it's the repeat? No one's ever going to have forgiveness for that. And it's not actually the fear of the repercussion per se, it's just the knowledge as a human being that we are supposed to propagate the species, not end it. Anything that leads to the harm of others, regardless of intentions, tends to create an emotional reaction that often matches the intensity of the circumstance. And if it doesn't, then that usually tends to point out some sort of personality pathology. The problem is that although time, they says, heals all wounds, maybe so, but doggone does it leave deep scars. If that's the case, then knowing that every time that circumstance comes up, every time that situation comes up, your very first basic schema is okay, similar to doctors actually, do no harm. Like whatever you do, don't screw this up. But we all know that that type of negativistic thinking can just feed in on itself Although you may get the feedback, okay, nothing bad happened this time. It's like, right, because I purposely applied that thought that I couldn't screw it up. So my job is not to screw up. That's it. That actually starts to become the beginning and the end. Whatever you do, just don't screw up. Don't screw up. You woke up this morning, don't screw up. You're going to work now, don't screw up. You're coming home now, don't screw up. You're going to be talking to your family now, don't screw up. What if you have an anger problem? What if you actually had domestic violence issues? That's literally, to take some of the words we talked about with Black Bolt, every grunt that you make now is a potential threat. Every time you sound a little off in your voice, that's putting fear in people's minds. Every time you groan or just let out that long sigh, people think it may be the end of their world. Sometimes these aren't just analogies, even if we're not just talking about the electrons that the voice is supposed to represent.
And the idea of walking around and constantly saying, don't screw up, don't screw up. If so much of your life is defined by either a failure that happened or the potential for failure, if that becomes your entire being, then there is no room for success. There's no way for you to feel joy. There's no way for you to feel pride. There's no way for you to feel any real positive emotion because your entire existence is defined by negativity. And so there's no absence of that. There's no room for growth. And that is very heavy stuff. And I dare say that unfortunately there are many people walking this world today with those thoughts who do not have Black Bolt's power, do not have the ability to destroy a world with a sound, but still carry around those perpetual intrusive thoughts of don't screw up, don't screw up, just don't get this wrong. Matt says this is what I imagine a police officer or firefighter's life is like. My father was a fireman for 25 years. And I will tell you, at least from that perspective, I can't necessarily speak to police from the perspective of a lifelong firefighter. Um, he focused on all the people that he saved and all the good that he was able to do. I don't know, come to think of it, I don't honestly know if we've ever had a discussion about any of the losses that I'm certain that he encountered. I mean, he was a fireman in Irvington, New Jersey, which for those of you that don't know, it's a very urban area. Um, it's a fairly it's a large-ish city. It's not on the scale of a a Newark, but it's a fairly large city. Um, I'm certain that he encountered loss. I'm certain that he was in a fire where people were unfortunately died. But I don't know that in my almost 40 years of life that I've ever had a conversation with him about that. Because knowing my father, he's not the type who would bring that up voluntarily. But the stories that he does tell are largely either about the people he was able to save or the cast of characters that he worked with in the firehouse. That's the overwhelming majority of my father's stories involve someone playing a prank in the firehouse, and usually alcohol was involved. Um, and yes, these are the people tasked with saving lives. Food for thought, but I know at least from his perspective, he doesn't dwell on any of the losses that he encountered, um, because I don't know that it would have been. Uh, I don't know that he would have been able to come home with himself if he dwelled on that. And that's not who my father is, just in general. Um, as much as my father loves to complain about stuff, he's not. And I say that and half in jest. Um, he's not the type to dwell on things of that nature. So I can't imagine that he's going to spend a lot of time thinking about all the people that he couldn't save, because that's not who he is. Having said that, I'm also willing to say with 99.99% certainty that there are people out there who do in fact dwell on that, that there are first responders who do unfortunately succumb to that constant thought of, I couldn't save this person, I couldn't save them, I couldn't help these people, and it eats at them. I know this. I know this for a fact. And I'm sure, Doc, you've encountered many of them in your line of work as well. They are out there. And I mean, this is one of many reasons why I say we need to provide better counseling services for our first responders, even, irrespective of COVID, that just based on the nature of their work, that they need the counseling services to be able to continue to do what is a very vital, important job in society. But, back to that point that it, if you're constantly thinking of all that negativity, you don't allow yourself any room for growth. You don't allow yourself any grace, and you don't allow yourself any mercy to understand and acknowledge that there were a multitude of circumstances beyond your specific actions that led to whatever the negative result was. And the vast majority of those circumstances were outside of your control. And so you have to allow yourself that grace. And I think if you boil that down to a non-emergency response, that there are many things. We were just talking last week about Cyborg and trying to live a life without regrets. We all have regrets. It's the nature of the beast. It's the nature of the human condition. But you have to allow yourself that grace on the smaller scale to forgive yourself for the things that were outside of your control. Um, Unfortunately, Black Bolt's not in a situation where he can do that, but we are. And so that's something that we need to keep in mind and, be mindful of if we ever start getting those thoughts welling up inside our brains, as we all are wont to do. So issue number 3, overwhelming responsibility. You are not just trying to function as a part of society you can't realistically fit into. You are its king. Every one of your people looks to you for leadership, and you have to run your society and make your wishes known without being able to easily communicate them. When you have to have a conversation with other people where you don't know what you're going to have to communicate in advance, you are fully reliant on others that you have to place your trust in to communicate for you. Spoiler alert, this is a large part of the skit. With all the lack of nuance that implies, really, really in the skit. You don't just not have a physical voice, you don't have a metaphorical one either. It's Medusa or Professor X or someone else you have a psychic connection with acting on your behalf. That's terrifying on a deep personal level. Like I said, the fact that this man functions at all is a great credit to his incredible mental fortitude.
Amen to that. I really think that encapsulates that particular issue. And I don't know if I have much to add. I will say though, and this is where I get into this terrifying realm that sometimes I say things and like in retrospect, people will come up to me and say that I really messed them up, and that's not my goal. um, that's what we're doing with each other every day. What do I mean? You do not have a full access conversation with every person that you know every waking second of their life, but they have one of you. They have their representation of you. They have their memories of whatever experiences and interactions that they've had with you in the past. They have whatever you have on social media. They have whatever formats that you've used outside of social media. If you've written things down, if you've left voicemails, if you have books, if you've done any form of public media, TV, radio, et cetera, et cetera. And the people that know you that may have interacted with you that have therefore interacted with that other person, and they give their representation of you. And this happens because we all have conversations about other people that aren't around us at the time, not to gossip. I'm not saying it necessarily in a negative way, but just to talk about the fact that we know each other. It's just what we do. It's a good part of how our society has lasted for as long as it has. So the fact that you are never going to be the perfect representation that someone has already set in their mind, that is a very heady thing to ever have to think about if you put it in the forefront of your consciousness. And I don't recommend that you automatically do that unless you're preparing for like a business meeting or a presentation or something like that where the stakes are much higher. Anything else that really shouldn't be at the forefront, you should just be who you want to be and say what you want to say. But man, oh man, that's why, as had been pointed out before, we get so many things wrong in different formats when the person's not there. It's because our brain doesn't work that way. We are not recorders, we are interpreters. We take what is around us and only have our view of it based on what has already been processed with a lot of chemicals in our system that are natural to us. And for some of us, maybe a little unnatural. Not trying to pick sides on that. Um, but really, we're always creating this imperfect canvas and painting on it and repainting on it. And then when the person that originally was trying to give us all the feedback comes back and says, "This isn't me." Well, it was to me based on what you said before. Anything that's changed, you're going to give new information. But it's not adversarial like that. It's just simply updating the last conversation you had. If you had it yesterday, fine, not much information. If it was 5 months ago, maybe a lot of information, but maybe you don't have that much time. So it's going to be incomplete information. And guess what our brains do? They fill in the gaps. So yes, it's terrifying if you are in a situation with like Black Bolt is, where you are having direct conversations, but you still can't control them because someone else has to do that for you. Foreign language interpretation is definitely one of the worst areas in mental health when it comes to miscommunication. And I deal with this. Thankfully, we have video interpreters now, which is definitely better. And it's immediate as well, as opposed to having to try and find an interpreter either in person and then waiting for them for the next day. Imagine that you're in the hospital and you have to wait until the next day to make sure that you understand what a person is saying to you. That sounds terrifying to me. And then in addition to that, once the person is there, you have to trust that other person that they are actually doing what they're supposed to, which is just simply give the information as to what you're saying, not trying to put their political spin, their personal spin, their emotional, cultural spin. Ooh, boy, that's a huge task for any human being to do on a reliable, regular basis. Thankfully, they are trained at that. But I can guarantee, I shouldn't say guarantee, I can close to guarantee. See, I'm already doing it. Uh, I can close to guarantee that most family members aren't. And yet, those are the people that we rely on when we go to the store if they speak a different language. Or if there's for whatever reason a person wasn't able to say what they wanted to say to that coworker that they wanted to talk to, so they give you a message and it becomes a game of telephone later on, and you hear the rumor that got spread about you because of what you said to that person that is totally inaccurate from what you actually said. So yes, it is terrifying when Black Bolt goes through it because it's so direct, but in all honesty, that's everything that we do in life. And it is every interaction. And somehow we haven't managed to kill each other. So I think we actually do a pretty good job. I'll leave it on a positive note.
Well, I was going to say the very fact that there's a game called Telephone shows the inherent nature in how easily spoken communication can be manipulated. Just the very nature of the game is you're trying to repeat whatever was said to you correctly. Now, do you want to mess with it? Certainly there's an element of randomness, but again, that's inherent to spoken communication. But that every day we're constantly, in essence, playing a game of telephone, sometimes with our own brains. I mean, if you really want to you know, if you really want to think about it that way, that how many times have we said, "Oh, there's a thought, I just don't have the words for it," because there's a disconnect between your brain and your own friggin' mouth as to how do you correctly interpret what it is that you want to say. So if your brain and your mouth can't agree on what it is that you want to say, I think it's very difficult for us to be able to expect that what two people say to each other is going to convey with 100% certainty everything that they're trying to get across.
So, but the best example I think of this at the scale that Matt was talking about, uh, I'll admit I don't know that much about this coach, but he has done TV and radio after he retired as a coach. He coached the Baltimore Ravens when they crushed the New York Giants in the Super Bowl. Brian Billick. And he described when he became head coach, he said, I used to have sideline conversations with other staff members. And I would say, like, oh, we probably should have a pre-meeting about this so that, the linebackers are all on the same page. And it would be like, oh, that's nice. He pointed out that he had made a comment during a practice, like the first week he was head coach. And that next week on a Monday morning, he got a phone call saying, Coach, you're late for the meeting. And he's like, what meeting? He said he was told that he had just ordered the entire like offensive line or something to have an extra video session, like just going over film. And he's like, I said that to the towel manager that I think we need to get the offensive line more organized. And all of a sudden it's another committee. He's like, how does this happen? And, and so he basically said from then on, he would keep his mouth shut unless he was in a meeting. If he was around other staff, he wouldn't say anything because the second that he said something, people would think, well, he's the boss, so that must be what we have to do. And they would put their own interpretation on it. So just to speak to it, like, it's not just, I know I try and make sure we relate to as many people in their basic lives as possible, but holy crap, when you get up to higher levels like that, and that's true for government too. I'm not going to, say that it's just in comics. Yeah, I think this happens a lot. I'm just not going to get into the whole paranoid realm because I want to keep my sanity.
Whatever sanity you have left, whatever sanity any of us have left, frankly, at this point. So we're going to take a break. We're going to plug our sponsor, BetterHelp. And when we get back, we will get into treatment. Stay tuned. All right. And we're back. So in-universe treatment, and this is something that I had discussed with Doc beforehand because I have read a lot more Inhumans and Inhuman adjacent books than Doc has. So I was able to fill him in on some of the ways in which uh, Doc in universe can communicate with Black Bolt directly without the need of other interpreters and other people necessary.
Yeah, and I'm actually gonna expand on it. And we didn't talk about this ahead of time, but the whole point of, yes, finding some area where he can just speak without the repercussions of significant damage. That's fantastic, and I relish that idea. The thing that I'll admit I'm not good at, but I think Black Bolt is even worse at, I want long form. Because when you have to rely on interpretation all the time, you learn very quickly. And actually, professional interpreters will say this if you've ever had to go through this yourself. Please speak slowly and in short sentences and allow me to have pauses and potential interruptions. That means you're going to have a certain cadence that doesn't allow for quote unquote speeches, if you know what I'm saying. It's much more staccato, very start and stop, get one thought out, let it finish, then get the next thought out, which can make speech much more intentional, and that can be helpful, but it's not the stream of consciousness. And sorry if that sounds a little too woo woo for you, but it's not allowing for the creativity and emotional expression that free flowing thought is provided for when you're allowed to speak the way I am now, with that kind of sort of endearing rambling that I do. That is a real pain in the ass for Anthony to edit. It still is a way for someone to put things together that they may not put together otherwise in their own head. And it's why I do it. I do this and think this way, regardless of if there's anything to record, people. That's a scary thought, isn't it? But that's true. This really is how I process stuff. I just don't say it out loud. But Black Bolt, that's all he ever does because that's all he ever can do with other people. So you got to imagine he hasn't developed that. just go ahead. Metaphors, anything. Oh, I just see Matt said, and don't use idioms. Yes, that's absolutely true. You cannot take colloquial phrases. That's the worst thing you can do. If you have to rely on someone to interpret your words. But that's what needs to develop, because I think that would increase his enjoyment of life as a whole. At least that's my thought.
No, it's a very valid point indeed. And I find myself editing out so many gaps in my speech in the podcast because I'm trying to speak efficiently and not ramble on. I don't think you ramble that much, Doc, and certainly it's not as much of a pain in the ass to edit out as when you inevitably just sort of drop your voice like that. That's way more of a pain in the ass to edit out. Just, keep it at 100. So I do that certainly while speaking in the show is I will take that extra second and say, what am I going to say? But yes, to your point, using all of the words that you can to properly convey all of your thoughts. This is why uh, I have, I don't want to say controversial, but interesting opinions on the use of profanity, specifically as it relates to expression, because my mindset is the English language is a palette of vast colors, and the words that we use are intended to paint the full tapestry of our respective thoughts. Why am I going to arbitrarily eliminate some of those colors from my vocabulary just because they may offend some potential sensibilities? If I need to incorporate a particularly striking color or phrase in my speech, then I'm going to use it. And I'm going to use it to make that point. Now, I've said before that people who consistently use profanity on a regular basis without any regard for its impact, I don't think are, I don't think that highly of them. But I am not going to get my, I'm not going to go clutching at my pearls if someone uses the F word to convey, to punctuate a thought, because it gets your attention and it proves the point.
Anthony, I didn't know you had pearls. Ah, see. Just saying, just saying.
But that proves, but there again, that gets back to the point of Black Bolt needs to use all of his words. And if Black Bolt wants to curse, let him curse. If he wants to ramble and do stream of consciousness, let him do it. Go for it. Put him in that situation where he has to, because efficient language is not comprehensive language. You lose something there. There's something to be said for the fact that novels are still read regularly, even though we have access to text. And I think there's something to be said for forcing people to write long form and forcing people to speak and communicate in long form, because we're so used to text, tweets, short captions, TLDR. Like, give me some long form stuff. Give me a long story. Elaborate, paint a picture, bring me in, because it's more engaging. Yes, communicative. You, Matt, language is a poor enough form of communication as it is. We need to use every word we've got. And to that I say, fucking A right. So out of universe, what does a therapist do with a patient that is mute by choice was sort of our thought. And then Matt says the real world parallels we talked about before: deaf, hard of hearing, and mute people, stroke victims, people with throat cancer, or something else that necessitates an electronic voice box. Hell, I'll even go so far as people residing in a country where they don't speak the prevailing language and are reliant upon interpreters to perform basic interactions with others. It can be a constant, nonstop, terrifying journey through life when you just can't communicate with others on your own. And like I said, I plead ignorance, but I assume non-communicative people need psychological counseling. I just have no idea how that's done when verbal communication is such a vital part of the process. So,
And yeah,
blink one for yes and two for no, or,
yes,
you know,
you got it,
one
dude.
light for yes, two lights for no.
Yep.
like the Star Trek. What
You
was
got
that? The yeah,
yeah, I mean,
Captain Pike, I think.
yeah, and that's the part where we have to be honest with ourselves. It's a matter of just how inaccurate do we want to be? Do we ever want to get to 60%? And I apologize if that sounds very cruel or rude. It's not meant to. It's pointing out that we want to be non-zero. Uh, it's unfortunate because yes, all that nuance is lost. It comes down to yes and no questions. Uh, well, first of all, it also comes down to the psychological component as to whether or not the person, as Anthony pointed out, we also were talking about selective mutism, the idea that a person just simply is not speaking. I have to discern as a professional if that is a choice that has been made due to fear, if it's anxiety, trauma, if it's depression, psychosis, because the person is paranoid, is the person internally preoccupied, meaning they're hallucinating? There's a lot of psychiatric reasons as to why a person is not speaking, and medical reasons as well, as has already been mentioned. So, from that standpoint, that's something that I do all the time. And believe it or not, if it is something where the person is what we call in a quote unquote catatonic state, it means that they have demonstrated the ability to communicate at a proficiency for their education level and is simply not doing it at the time. And it appears to be a consequence of severe depression or psychotic illness. There is medication for it. Usually, it's a benzodiazepine. Not to play favorites on it, but the point is, it's amazing how people that haven't talked for a week all of a sudden start getting more active and talking again as if nothing ever happened. Or some people do have recollection of what happened and are like, "Wow, that was weird." It's nice to see. So those are one of the rare times where if you catch an audience, what I mean by that is if uh, you get new staff that haven't had a case like that. You have medical students or nursing students that haven't had a case like that, and you just say, "Oh, just prescribe this medication," and you check back the next day, and they're like, "It's a miracle! It's a miracle!" It's a really cool feeling. But I personally actually get the opposite response, so I intentionally tell everyone ahead of time what I think is going to happen, and when it happens, it's like, "Oh, you were right." It's like, okay, that's a little better because I don't like the dramatic responses. But enough about me. I'm sorry. I apologize. Uh, to get back to the other point, Anthony hit it right on the head. It's just what is the person's level of communication and making sure that you delegate enough time so that you can ask as many questions as possible. And it's amazing how creative a person can be in terms of making something a yes or no question. And Anthony, as an attorney, although I know you're not a trial attorney, I'm saying like in law school, I don't know if they go over those sorts of things because I can't imagine. That's not really my job in general. It's to actually have people expound, not to diminish. And yet that's what you're doing. You're diminishing the possibilities for how a person responds to every aspect of their life, which ooh, that's pretty arduous.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's difficult just to communicate. Again, it's difficult to communicate sometimes with people who speak your own language.
Yeah.
Never mind someone who can't or won't.
Yeah. So here's the other issue with this. There are ways to get around it, but once again, it depends on the availability of what the person has. So if the person has physical communication, that's great. You have someone write things down. It's slower, but yes, it can be done. Typing can be done. All of that. Wonderful. Full use of language. Okay, great. You lose the emotional subtleties, nuance, etc. We already discussed that. Here's the
Cadence.
yeah, yeah. Here's the other big problem though. What if they don't have that? What if they also have severe physical limitation? Then how am I supposed to I'm going to be very candid about this. I can at least say to someone, let's say that they're from outside of our particular country. Point to and we need to contact family. Point to the country where you're from. That can help provided the person can point. If I give a person a map, how on earth? I mean, let's be real about this. Unless they have like a laser guided, or there is eye modeling that is done. I don't want to diminish that. I'm just saying, if you don't have it readily available, but you want that information, how am I supposed to find that out? You can't say yes for the US. I mean, like you could just say, blink once for United States and two for the rest of the world, or blink once for the Western Hemisphere and twice for the Eastern. Okay, now blink once for Europe versus twice for really, really. So there is significant limitation to this, and it's just a matter of how granular you're going to get. So that's why I say 60%. I'm like, you know what? That's what we can do in the moment. And it's not, I didn't say it's good. I didn't say it's perfect. I'm saying it's what we can do. If you have a choice between doing something and doing nothing, do something.
Yep, we've said that before on this show. So, well, Black Bolt can't speak, so the idea of a vocal skit for the therapy session was going to be a lot of one-sided communication. So instead of doing that, we brought back our friend and fellow mental health avenger Anna from Freudian Sips to reprise the role of Medusa, and she's going to help us get Black Bolt on Dr. Issues' couch. Ready when you are.
All right, 3, 2. Hello, Black Bolt. I'm Dr. Issues. And hello again, Medusa. Thanks for joining us to interpret. Normally, I don't do this, but given the unique communication barriers here, it's helpful to have someone else.
Of course, Doctor. Good to see you again as well. Black Bolt and I appreciate you taking the time to speak to us.
Please understand, no offense, but this is not meant to be a couple session. As an interpreter, your role is to make sure Black Bolt statements are proved. As an interpreter, your role is to make sure that Black Bolt statements are provided as clear as possible. Therefore, I'll be speaking and looking at him directly while you assist us. If there's anything that needs clarification, please let me know.
Yes, of course, Doctor. Black Bolt says thank you.
Great. Now, what can I help you with today?
Black Bolt says he wants to make strides with the world at large without disrupting his personal life.
That sounds reasonable, albeit a bit vague. I'm aware that you have a large role in your kingdom. Is there a particular aspect of your job that you're struggling with?
Black Bolt says that he detests the notion that society can't fix its own ills. My apologies. He says that he wants others to have more participation and involvement so he doesn't have to carry most of the burden himself.
That makes sense. I emphasize appropriate delegation all the time. Is there something that prevents you from having that kind of balance you envision?
He says there are too many functions to go through on a daily basis that are set to the royal family by default. Tradition weighs us all down, especially his wife.
Well, based on what I know, although there's still a right to confidentiality for the details, I can say that dovetails well with your personal relationships.
Black Bolt says that he is thankful someone finally understands. Wait, I'm sorry, I need to start over. Black Bolt says he is thankful I finally understand him better now.
Huh?
Black Bolt wants to focus on the loss of his free time. He is draining himself to serve the people and serve his family.
Oh, that took a bit of a turn. I'm sorry that things have been such a struggle. What are your coping mechanisms? Like, how do you recover?
Black Bolt says he enjoys time for literature and taking walks with me.
Oh, that's so kind. But whoa, he's shooting a glare at you right now. What's up?
He says that is not quite what he meant. He likes walking alone, thinking about me. I apologize. He's going so fast now. It's hard to keep up.
You seem very angry. Do we need to take a break?
I'm just fine, Doctor.
No, no, I meant Black Bolt. Like I said, please just tell me what he's saying.
Black Bolt says that things aren't the way they're supposed to be right now. This is slightly frustrating. If I weren't his queen, I would be somewhere less pleasant at the moment.
Are you are you censoring him? I would strongly advise you not do that for the sake of any hope of progress.
We apologize, as in the royal we, because I have done nothing wrong. Black Bolt wishes to have an independent. No,
An independent what?
an independent point of view on how his emotions can be controlled. Oh my.
Well, I recognize that finger and what that means. It's obvious that there's a breakdown here. Um, perhaps we could all use a timeout.
No, let's continue speaking. After all, it's good to get things off of one's chest, right, dear?
No words necessary, and I do mean that literally. Let's try this one more time.
Black Bolt says
Nope,
that.
nope, no way. I see where this is going. I was a fool to think this wasn't a couple session. All right, no interpreter. Black Bolt, sir, I have no problem with you as a patient, but I also realize that I have to put you in the most awkward situation imaginable, and I'm sorry. We have to find another way to do this. I know you can write. Maybe secure email and text instead. Less hassle that way.
Black Bolt says he wants to keep trying. Wait, keep trying how? I don't know how that works.
What is it?
So this is me talking. He wants to make sure that you know I mean well, but tell you how I felt after my last session with you. But I don't want to make it about me. That's not the point.
So he's asking you something. I mean, that's fine. Ultimately, it's up to you.
Black Bolt says this interaction is a microcosm of how he feels every day. Bottled up, locking away a part of him that no one ever gets to know because it's too dangerous. He has to be a statesman as well as a man of action. Without a proper outlet, he oh,
What?
he wonders if that's what childhood was supposed to be.
I I don't have an answer for that. Your experience is so beyond what I could imagine, and to have someone be your voice from day one, always, uh, geez, like just reified, monitored, scrutinized, manipulated, and yet bearing witness to the multitude of variants that humans and inhumans, the way they describe it, knowing full well that'll never be your lot in anything that goes on. That's, man, I'm going to tell you, that's strength, but it's also potential for agony. Dude, I'll just say it. You're quite the being, Black Bolt. You're the definition of life's beautiful struggles, and I thank you for what you endure.
Black Bolt says, "Wait, doctor, I can't, I won't interpret what he's saying."
Uh, did did I do something to offend him?
No, please understand what is about to happen is, in a perverse way, the highest honor he can bestow upon you. And just please note that we have means to make amends.
I have no clue what you're talking about right now.
I'll let him explain for himself.
For himself. Wait, what?
Thank you.
I truly appreciate the definition of peace and quiet now more than ever.
Thank you. I'm really going to have to figure out how to, play with the audio editing on that to accurately get that.
Yeah.
All right. Never before has someone said so much with so little. Small words, big impact.
What?
I said small words, big impact.
What? I'm sorry. This is going to be very difficult because that entire session just threw off my entire sense of hearing. So, um I apologize if I'm blowing out people's speakers right now. Uh, Imagine that and then put it through the megaphones Bart Simpson style in that one episode of The Simpsons. And yeah, you'll get what I'm experiencing right this moment.
When you were doing the what?
Yeah.
What? I had 1 beer. What? 2 beers. What? 3 beers. What? What? It's amazing 20 years later and they're still doing that to
Yep.
people cutting promos. Anyway, recommended reading. So again, we've got 2 possibilities here. One, the original Inhumans introduction in Fantastic Four, the Lee Kirby stories. Can't get better than that. Also, the Paul Jenkins J. Lee Inhumans run. Um, both very big stories involving the Inhumans, the royal family, Black Bolt. I believe we referenced them when we did the Medusa episode as well. Oh, and again, apologies. Thank you, Anna. You can check out Freudian Sips. Basically, just look for Freudian Sips. I believe they're Freudian Sips Pod, based on social media, and they're fellow mental health Avengers, and we will be getting together with them sometime very, very soon. I put the clarion call out, and we've got an amazing topic that we're very excited to roundtable with our fellow mental health Avengers. So look for that coming up. So next episodes, Echo, and then the 150th episode anniversary spectacular, and then number 4 from the Umbrella Academy. So we're going to have some good stuff there. So again, reminder, get those questions in for the mailbag/AMA for the 150th episode. And you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Capes on the Couch. Our website is capesonthecouch.com, and it's got all of our episodes up there in addition to some other stuff. So, and if you like what you hear, you can subscribe and support the show. Patreon.com/Capes on the Couch. $1, $3, or $5 a month unlocks you additional content, early access, uncensored material, bloopers, a whole bunch of good stuff. And so that's going to wrap it up. So, Doc, it's time for your pun now.
Okay. So everything's recovered. I get it. Uh, just to let you know, a bolt can be an uncontrolled, specific form of energy, usually electricity, that can create a massive amount of destruction in a fraction of a second. It can also be a small device that actually is used to be a fixture in the structure that is necessary for heavy support. Whichever way you decide to use that in your life is up to you.
Ooh, so not a pun, but food for thought. I like that. That's a mic drop moment ending the episode. So for Doc Issues, I'm Anthony Sitko. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week. Oh, boy.
Hey, man, we got through it.
Yes, we did. And now, God's willing, I can edit these episodes quickly to, give the create the backlog that was the whole reason why we did this in the first place. So otherwise, the backlog doesn't mean much if I'm still editing, the like 2 days before the episode drops. Defeats the
Fair enough.
purpose.
Yep.
So, well, Matt, thank you for sticking with us, and appreciate, as always, your feedback. We love incorporating that into the episodes.
Yep.
And I'm gonna go. So tomorrow night, I told Kat, tomorrow night is USA versus Canada in women's hockey, but the game is at 11:10.
Oh.
I'm like, well, I'm just gonna stay up and watch it, and I'll just come into work late Tuesday morning because I I am that guy who will stay up to 11 o'clock to watch group play. It's not even the medal round yet. It's group play, but it's US versus Canada. So I'll be representing, showing out for the women.
Understood.
Because I love me some hockey, but the men, they're not going to do it. They're not going to do shit for us.
Yeah, I get it.
I mean, even if we had the NHLers, it'd be an outside chance of us winning a gold, but at least we'd have a shot.
Right.
Now with these college kids, nah. This is not going to be a repeat of Miracle on Ice. I don't see that happening. I'll root for the women
Yeah,
because I know that they're going to get no worse than silver.
fair enough.
All right, man. Well, I'll let you get to bed. Good
Thank
night,
you.
Matt. And we'll catch y'all later.